I'm Rodney McMillian.
I'm Caroline Bergvall.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the project you're doing together?
These pauses are fantastic. Yeah, that's it.
It's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was, It's been, the journey through it has been really quite phenomenal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What are you guys, what are some of the literal things you've been doing, like talking to Abe Vigoda and stuff like that?
We've been driving, recording, talking, eating, and drinking.
And smoking lots of cigarettes.
Smoking lots of cigarettes.
Listening to lots of music.
Yeah. And we've been traveling in the sense that I'm here in LA now, but Rodney came to London in January, and I was here in November. So there's been that's very much part.
Yeah.
Because of the kind of settling we have to do in order to each be in the other's space. So that's actually it's become
a big part of it.
A big part of it, what it means to set up a very different meeting point, a different,
And also dealing with not being settled, and I think also discovering or trying to find language for form when what we mostly have shared is through experience and language in terms of our friendship that's developed over the years. So it's been so in that regard, it has been about traveling, like a journey of just even how do you meet in terms of form in ways that that coincide or coexist with a friendship and a dialogue around practice that we each kind of have shared over the years.
Although we're both quite interdisciplinary in the way that our work ends up, the way it's presented. We each use different kinds of elements and different kinds of media in each our works. To find out which ones would be the ones that we might end up using together, that's been really an incredible question, which I don't think we were ready for.
No.
I think we also thought
we thought it would just be kind of seamless, actually, like a conversation.
Yeah, and that not at all. And suddenly we realized our entire research and process is completely different. And so that's been.
It's whoa.
We've had to learn to understand what that might mean and how we then function across what has suddenly become very unknown territory, actually. And therefore, what do we each bring from our practice to the table that might be usable in this sort of new domain, which is one way or another not even just a piece of work of ours, but actually that we do something together, rather than actually drive, talk, or as part of driving, talking, eating, which we do as friends as well. So.
We each have a known unknown. We understand we understand our own spaces of what the unknown means for us, but it registers differently depending upon which one of us. For me, the interviews are this. The way that audio is constantly on is kind of an unknown for me, an idea of just vignettes of sound in a certain way, being cataloged in a way, just being recorded that then could translate to this other kind of form. And I mean, we've all used some type of audio in our practice, at least if you do video work or performance work, there's always some type of audio component. But I think, for me, there is an unknown with that. And I'd imagine sometimes with the video camera or the video work, there's a different kind of relationship that you perhaps experienced with that.
Yeah, I have. That's been the first time we did video was in London, and that was extremely uncomfortable for me. I was really, and that's remained as the question that I came to LA with this time, which is because I've kind of a lot of what I write has to do with issues to do with recognition and familiarity and unfamiliarity in relation to language, in relation to speech. And I've been very interested in the notion of face, what is face, and what it might mean. And I've written a sort of longer piece around that, where the whole language is sort of disconnected. But to be faced with an image-making process, not a linguistic one, that was shocking. And I've been really wanting to, understand why that was such a difficult process for me. And we're still there, really. We haven't.
We totally are. And I mean,
yeah.
it's great you brought up face, because like with some of my work, it deals directly with the face, or the masking of it, or like, and thinking about subjectivity in those kinds of constructs. And so I think perhaps with the audio and like my voice being recorded as much as it is, it's like, that's like the voice without the face too. And it's very disconcerting, because like I'm not very comfortable with my voice, like as a speaking tool in that. In the same way, like I don't usually use it through my work in that way, but you do. And so like these points of like comfort and discomfort have been like striking to discover.
And therefore the difficulty in knowing, really, I mean, not even just the end point, but the midpoint that takes us from a raw process towards a process that is starting to generate product, or starting to generate
ideas,
a working mechanic,
yeah.
Or so all the hesitations around that, technology, how we place ourselves and why we place ourselves in relation to different kinds of technologies, social technologies, artistic technologies, why we would choose to do this and why not that, and that's very much part of, well, a bit like what you say around the politics. It is informing our understanding of who we are as artists individually, and then how do we bring some of that through the surprise and the shock of what we discover about each other's processes, and through these media that we're not familiar with, that we give each other, that we bring to each other.
Yeah.
So it's a long meandering, very long and meandering process, and sort of very exhausting. So we don't...
Extremely.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily like in a non-productive way, but it's just like, I think just trying to communicate what is known and unknown for us each, and also like, I think also the work of recognizing that like you can have the feeling, but the idea of actually putting language to it is like a whole another process. At least it is for me. And so it's like, and so that whole process of like being able to articulate the different, I keep using, I think I want to use the word process, but trying to articulate what has happened, or what is being discovered, and what is being understood or not understood through the process has been one of the things where, at least for me, a lot of the work has been in that space, which I think is why we're so much where we're driving so much, because that's a place where you're kind of in this bubble, you're encapsulated, and you're dealing with the outside, but you're kind of protected in this space, and like you need to communicate, because you like just for directions even, and that's been a very generative space for us.
Well, we tried to go outside, to leave the car and go outside, or leave Rodney's patio and go outside. And to manage to do that, in a way that wasn't just about having a conversation, we had this idea of using songs, because again, it's a very familiar and very sketchy way of using language. And it's something that also connects us, an interest we share in music and the role of popular music in all our identities. And even that was still so vulnerable and raw, because for me as a poet, it's the whole horrors of bad readings and you were mentioning the sort of 2/3 shot and the face half, the face on one side and then the sky on the other, and those horrible things. So it was a really devastating moment for me, and I was saying to Ronnie, I spent 15 years of my practice as a writer avoiding
that shit.
And here I am with you, and this is what we do. So we sort of moved away from that. We agreed.
That will be cut out of there. No, I'm just kidding.
And that was really interesting. Again, he was like, okay, but hang on, because for my practice and for my scene, if you like, with the art form that I'm often sitting part of, it means this. And then for other things that I was bringing, Ronnie was saying, well, for where I sit, what you're saying here, it really means this, and this is just not, it's not so cool, it's sort of super cliche or whatever. So we had to also deal with that. We both have a sort of very fluid understanding of cultural art forms, but actually have a specialist knowledge of how we can move it on or not. And some of what we were trying to do by standing out in the street, recording each other speaking, in that form, I knew as a writer and as a poet, that is not so interesting in that form. And so I could say, we need to take the idea but drop that form. And then Rodney could say the same about other elements that we're working on. Well, that is not going to push on much because we're immediately facing those walls. Now, I thought that's an interesting way also of trying to keep on cutting out sort of banalities and sort of, cutting out known ways of presenting oneself as a collaborative team, stuff like that.
And it's also brought up this idea of around the cliche, like, can it be used? Like, of course it can. But is there a space for it too? Or how do we do that as well within that space where how does the corny work in the context?
But that really seems that will need to come.
It's going to become. We're going to discover this. It's something that will have to be discovered through the process. Mm-hmm. Because it's also has been circulating around so much because it keeps coming up through the newspaper and
Absolutely, that's right.
This idea around the newspaper, reading the newsper, having use as a newspaper, and I was like, whoa,
exactly.
all these kinds of, where it's well, actually, then I go to collage and Picasso and Cubism and at least with how we were talking about in terms of the form of it, and so it's been a really great dynamic kind of process of discovery because everything many things that I assumed or that I thought I knew about. How materials and content and context can be used gets shifted because of a different, because of Caroline's perspective and vice versa. So it's been, I think also just the fact that we do live in not only different cities, but different continents. So I think that's also been a component of this, how time works. I think there's been a discovery of differences in time and also how that relates to the body. Because we've discovered that there's such a the recovery of travel and then having to move immediately into a thinking process has been something that has been kind of challenging. Because I was only in London for about a week, and so it's you fly from here to there is about 11 hours on the flight, but you lose half a day or something like that. So just that trek and then immediately stepping off into this land and a different landscape with a whole different sky. Mm-hmm. I mean, that one thing that we talked about that was so interesting is just how it's almost you're in one of those shaky things where the sky, at least at that time of the year in London, was just so low, and so it's you're almost there's this blanket covering you, so it's almost you're there's a ceiling literally, whereas here there is no ceiling, and how that affects the body and the mind and in terms of, I'm going way off on a tangent, but yes, but those kinds of geographical changes has also been interesting to note within the context of the thinking process and how we've navigated the space itself.
Mm-hmm. We didn't want to do. Ron is going to do the visual bit, and then I'll write something, and we'll put that together, and perhaps we'll even speak it together. We never even talked about it that way. It was sort of immediate that is not.
That dynamic is really uninteresting.
So
it's not where the friendship formed.
No, that's right. So that also left us very wide open. Okay, so what are we going to do then? If you don't want to write and you don't want to do this, or
I don't want to paint or make a video.
What are we going to do? So that's also how we just have also kept it that open. What are we going to do, and why? Why we do what we might want to do. So we've had to allow for an organic process of the friendship and of all these discoveries to sort of starting to generate through each our skills and each our knowledges, ideas that are taking us through. And at the same time, keeping on having these conversations that have to do with perhaps where we place our politics, why we'd want to do a piece of work together anyway, so that beyond the formal aspects of the methodologies and things, what is it that we might feel comfortable about presenting as artists or as a collaborative team, and that's still very much a question that we're chewing on. Again, it all goes parallel. But one of the things that we thought about very quickly has to do with notions of education, indoctrination, empowerment, disempowerment of the individual within the structures, and we each sort of work with those elements in our works, and that I think is also very much at the root of our friendship and of our interest in talking about each other's politics through that. So
It's been the thing that keeps us on
yeah,
track too.
Exactly. So we carry those motifs, very large motifs, but we carry those also as part of how we might want to use the material, what it is we're trying to generate, basically.
Mm-hmm.